Good morning. So what we're looking at here, guys, is kind of a lesson plan that I have done before with the Boston Massacre. Um, if you're unfamiliar, the Boston Massacre is essentially an event in U.S. history where soldiers will fire upon an unarmed crowd of colonists who are protesting, and there's a lot of controversy that goes into that. What this lesson is really designed to do is to let the students see the event from the colonist perspective and from the soldiers' perspective, and really decide for themselves what they think happened and what they think is real. Um, because there is a lot of controversy about this event. A lot of people think that the soldiers were really not his fault, that the colonists had done something, or that there was some conspiracy with the Sons of Liberty going on here. And so, what this really is going to let the students do is read the primary sources that we have from the court case, testimonies from the soldiers, testimonies from the witnesses and the colonists, and let them decide for themselves what they think is real and what they think is not. Right. Our objectives for this is students will be able to read and understand the primary sources from the soldier's perspective and the captains and the colonists. They will identify similarities and differences between the primary sources. And of course, they will be able to discuss the Boston Massacre as a class and decide what they think occurred. Right? Some of our anticipatory set here. Number one, I like to start this lesson off with simply just asking, what is a massacre and what constitutes a massacre, right? Because a lot of students may know the word massacre, maybe not. It's not really a word we throw around a lot anymore in the 21st century. And a lot of what I anticipate from the students is, oh, well, a massacre is when a lot of people die, right? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, right? Sometimes as high as hundreds of people dying at the same time. And then I may ask them for a specific number. How many do they think, constitutes a massacre? Not just a vague number, but a specific, how many do they think constitutes it? And of course, I like to follow up with, okay, would they consider 5 people dying a massacre, right? Resoundingly, most people will tell me no, that's not a massacre, right? And then I ask the students, what do you know of the Boston Massacre? I like to do this either on Nearpod, where they can kind of do their clickers and put it up online, and everybody can kind of see the responses in an anonymous way. Or I've done it kind of the old school way with pen and paper. Either fine. And of course, when I get to do this, I get a lot of that pre-existing knowledge, that prior knowledge that they have, or maybe don't have, right? It really lets me gauge where the class is in terms of like where a starting point is. Because some classes come in and they know a lot, and some classes come in and they really know nothing about it, which is also a good place to start from as well, right? There's no preconceived notions there that may get in the way. Then when we get into the instructional strategies, what I like to do for this is actually kind of a combination of a flipped classroom and an interactive lecture. And the reason why I say flipped classroom is even though they are reading the content the day of class, right? They're not reading it before class. They're coming in really knowing nothing. And so after I ask them what they know, I will give them either an article or a summary or something and let them read it. And then once they have read it, then I go into the interactive lecture part for a few minutes where I explain, okay, this is the Boston Massacre. This is what happened. This is the people involved, right? And so they kind of get a chance to read that material first and then move into the actual discussion. And this is not the only one I've used. Sometimes I've printed out like summaries from textbooks or things, but this is also one I've used before, the Library of Congress summary of Boston Massacre. Very, very good. Then once I get into this, I will show them the engraving of Paul Revere, which really good kind of leads into this. I like to show this as I'm kind of doing the interactive lecture. Is I'll show them the engraving of Paul Revere's, the picture that he created for the Boston Massacre. I'll kind of gauge here some questions. I'll ask some questions to the class. What do you see in the engraving? How are the colonists portrayed? How are the British soldiers portrayed? According to the engraving, who is at fault for the massacre? And of course, how do you know, right? Always kind of using that contextual evidence, that critical thinking. How do you know this is the answer? Now, I have done this in a couple of ways. I've done this in a very simple, just informal way, right? Like a conversating back and forth. Sometimes I've actually done like a 3-2-1 analysis where I say, 3 things you learned, 2 things you already knew, 1 thing you didn't know about this subject going on. For the engraving, sometimes I've even done like the globe toss, where you throw the globe across the room and you tell me 1 thing you notice or 1 question, or like, they share, and I basically allow most, if not all of the class to kind of have a turn to ask a question, to share something like that. And then once we go through the engraving and the students have read their summaries, they've looked at the picture that the colonists saw of the Boston Massacre, then we kind of move into the actual collaborative work. What I like to do here, I've done groups as low as 3 or 4. Sometimes I've done as high as 6 or 8. For this here, I have 6 or 8 because in a college class, I feel like you're going to have bigger classes. And so I think 6 to 8, maybe even possibly 10 to 12 may be a standard number, depending on, since this is really based off of a freshman course, it will maybe probably as high as 12, right? Anyway, so in these groups, what they're going to do is, if you'll look right here, I have the various primary sources from Captain Preston, the testimony of the 8 soldiers that were put on trial. I have John Adams, the soldiers' lawyers, his testimony in kind of defending them. And then, of course, the various anonymous accounts from the various people that gave, the witnesses to what they saw during the event. And what I like to do is I really like to use the jigsaw method for this. I feel like it does a really good job of getting the students involved and kind of giving them a part, because they're not just sitting there going through 6 different articles, all super bored, but they know that they have a job to do. And I feel like when you're going to do group work, you have to give the students jobs. If you do not give them jobs, you have a lot of like issues going on where they may get distracted. Some people are doing all the work over others. And so what I like to do here is the jigsaw. What the jigsaw is I will give, I'll split them into their groups, and then I will give each group one of these articles, right? So for here I have 4, but I might use more than these primary sources. These are just a few of the primary sources that I've used before. And so basically for this one, there would be 4 groups of 10 to 12 people. And then I would tell them, okay, this is your job to read this material, make sure you know forward and backward. I would probably give them a couple of comprehensive questions to go with this, to, kind of gauge what they know, what they should know, what they shouldn't know. I would probably walk around at this time, point and kind of point out, like, oh, make sure you notice this, make sure you notice this, right? Then once that is done, after, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes, I like to do 10 minutes, right? Because I'm basing this off of a college class, which is about an hour and a half, sometimes hour and 15 minutes. And so I give them about 10 minutes to go through this source, maybe more depending on the class makeup. And then after that, I will go through and I will give each student a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'll kind of repeat that 1, 2, 3, 4, like all the 1s over here, all the 2s over here, all the 3s over here, and split them up that way. And then basically tell them to go round robin, where each member of that group was now present in those groups that analyzed that article. So each person in that group is now going to be an expert of the article that they just read, right? So somebody, for example, would be like, okay, well, Captain Preston's, account was, he was telling the soldiers, do not fire, do not stand, right? And of course, the soldiers on trial, the person who read that article would say, okay, well, the soldiers on trial said that, they were being attacked and they were being surrounded and they were scared and, they were doing their best to hold without nonviolence. And then, of course, the person who read the John Adams would say, that these men were only acting in self-defense, that this was, a riot, that, a protest gone wrong, right? And vice versa, right? They go down the list and they kind of share their expertise of each one. And what this does is, like I said, is for that brief moment, those 2 minutes, right? And I like to time this. It's really good to do that. It's like, okay, 2 minutes, the Captain Preston person in each group is going to speak now. 3 minutes, whatever. And this is really good because for those 2 minutes, that person is the star of the show. And I like this because now you have a small group where some people may be shy, but they're okay speaking in like a friend group kind of atmosphere, but not so much the whole class, right? So for those 2 minutes, 3 minutes, that person is now the expert. They have their undivided attention of the group, and they're going to share what they know, maybe answer some questions. And of course, I am there that if any questions are asked about the primary source, that I can step in and be like, oh, well, it's this and this. But I like to try to let the students handle as much as possible, right? Let this be as student-led as possible without me interfering, as, unless I absolutely need to, right? So after the jigsaw, I like to send everyone back. I like to follow this up with a classroom discussion where I can really highlight the major points of the articles or the sources to really make sure everyone's got what they're supposed to know. I like to give the following questions to the students to let them pair off in pairs to answer together. And I kind of ask these questions, give them a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes before, and let them answer these questions, in their groups. And then I like to bring it in classroom discussion, bring back your globe. I'm a big fan of the globe. It keeps that whole from answering, because every class is going to have that student that they like to answer, right? Those one student or 5, 10 students that have all the answers. And the globe is awesome. Or you can even use like the popsicle sticks or something like that, because it's awesome because it keeps that person from being always the one to answer, right? And I like to ask these questions. These questions can be anywhere from, can we agree upon a class what happened, right? And I like to share, what do you think happened? And they say, well, this happened and this happened because of this and this and this, and and does anyone disagree? And usually there is someone who disagrees and says, no, I think this happened because of this and this and this, right? And so it leads to a really good conversation about what is real and perception, right? Because to each person in that classroom, they have a different point of view and a different perception. And I love that, because for the students to be able to see that just like they had a different perception, so too did the soldiers and the colonists. And then the colonists within the colonists and the soldiers within the soldiers, they all had different points of view, and nobody really agreed about what happened exactly, right? I also like questions like what seems to be true and why, right? That conjecture, right? We know that there's a lot of propaganda going on with this event and this subject. And so what seems certain? What might be true, right? Because we don't always know. What do you think is certainly untrue, right? Because there are some of the sources, they make some outlandish claims that we know is not true, right? And then, of course, I like to have them kind of write their own little definition of the Boston Massacre, and I'll get to the website right now. And then, of course, this is an individual thing. This is kind of your own individual kind of definition of what you think the Boston Massacre is, based upon what you think is true and what is not true. And then, of course, I like to do kind of a class definition and ask them what things should we omit and what things should we add. And I love this because, like I said, everybody has their own definition, of what the Boston Massacre is, because everybody has a different list of what's true and what's not. And it really involves a lot of collaboration, but also critical thinking, and really some compromise too, because as a class, when you have to say, no, I don't agree with that, that's not what happened, and somebody says, well, it is what happened in my opinion, to have that kind of what is a class definition of what happened in the Boston Massacre is a lot of fun. To be the teacher, to just witness this happen as people really kind of conversate back and forth, and really writing this definition, you're really just there as a facilitator to write down what the students are saying, because they kind of take it from there as they go back and forth. For differentiation, there's a lot going on here. I like to use the collaborative groups, so that way the groups can help that one person who may be struggling a little bit more. Sometimes I've even printed Spanish and English, because I work with a lot of ELLs, and they're Hispanics. And so I like to print English and Spanish versions of these sources if I can find them. And so that way they can read it in Spanish and then have it in English to understand what's happening, because they've read it in Spanish, but they also have it in English for when they're writing their collaborative group. So I've always done that too. I like to toss the globe, because then it allows everybody to answer instead of just one person. I like to also use the pass method. It's one of my favorite things, where because you have those students, they're kind of the wallflowers and they're scared to talk, and tossing the globe to them, and they freak out, they get scared, and they don't know the answer. It allows them to go pass. Right? And then, I ask, okay, does anyone else have an answer? Or does someone want to help them? Right? And I'll ask that person, do you want some help? And if they say yes, I'll be like, okay, does anyone have an answer for them? And then, of course, they will toss it to that person. That person will give the answer. And then I will say, give it back to them. Okay? Go back to the person who was originally answering, who passed. And I'll say, okay, what was the answer? Right? And because I want them to feel safe enough to say, I don't know, and pass it, but I also want them to be able to pay attention and not just go, oh, sweet, awesome, I don't have to answer anymore. But know that, okay, listen to what this person just gave you the answer, Now I want you to, regurgitate that answer back to me, because that ensures that everybody is learning. And if you're nervous or you're just not good with the content or you're struggling, everybody can answer, everybody can learn from their peers, and everything's going on for there. Now, for the advanced students, I have some things at the bottom for the extension we'll go over in just a minute. Go for closure. For closure, I'm a big fan of exit tickets. I like to give exit tickets as much as I can. What I like to do this is for my own personal, as they walk out the door, give me the piece of paper, or I like to use clickers. Clickers are really good to get the data up on the wall and everybody can see the answers. There's a lot of different software for different types of clickers, but I like that. But let's say that we were using a paper version or just a digital version, like a Nearpod or clicker, just simple clicker. I put, in your opinion, what happened that night in 1770 in Boston, and what evidence do you have to support what you feel is right? What your claim is. And I love this because, number one, it lets everything summarize back in their heads, right? It lets them share their opinion of what they feel is right, and then prove it, right? So there's a lot of things going on here, right? Critical thinking, argument, defending an argument, taking a stand, critical thinking. Like I said before, there's a lot of different things here that are very important to not only your incoming freshmen, right, because they're coming straight out of high school, but also your upper level, where they will have to defend arguments. They will have to justify something and provide evidence for what they're believing, and not just say, this is what I believe, right? So I like this. It really does a practice on that skill. And of course, I don't just do it for this lesson. I do it all the time, just like with the toss the globe. I love consistency, doing something over and over and over to make sure that the students really understand the concept, they're comfortable with it, and they understand what their role is, because then they're more likely to be engaged. They're more likely to participate if they know what their expectation is and they know how to do it. If you do something new every single day, then there really isn't any consistency and the students are less likely to participate, and you really won't get those really awesome conversations that you would like to have with students. And finishing it up here, the extension. This is something I added for some of your advanced classes. I teach a lot of honors, but for college, you're also going to have some of those advanced students, and that you can offer maybe for extra credit. And let the students offer, create a podcast or presentation or a painting or a website, right? Maybe they're really good with digital, of the Boston Massacre in some way, and let them use that definition that they created within the discussion in some way, right? Do a 5-minute podcast over that definition, explaining what evidence they have or why, do a painting of it, or create a website explaining their definition of the Boston Massacre, what they think is real and what they don't, and why. And I love that because it allows the students to create something, which is always awesome. Bloom's taxonomy, right? Creating something. Because if they can create it and they can then present it, right, to you or to the class for extra credit, then that means they know it, right? And so this is how I would present this. I think it's an awesome lesson. I think it's an awesome subject. Because propaganda and the massacre itself, with being so controversial, really lends itself to a lot of student-led activities and conversations, because there is a lot of that argument about what's real and what's not real, and everybody has an opinion. But anyway, that's all I have for you. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I really do. It's really fun to get the students excited about something. And really see them kind of light up in sharing their opinions with each other, maybe even disagreeing with each other.